Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Culture and Coffee podcast. I'm Colin Ellis, and it's Monday, the 29th of August, 2022. Hope you're well, wherever you are in the morning. It's a nice, gentle start to the day. It's been a lovely weekend here in Melbourne. I joked with my brother that the weather was actually warmer here in Melbourne this weekend than when we were back in Liverpool recently, and that was in the summer and just end of winter here. But I hope you've had a good weekend. Today I'm going to be talking about how to manage different generations, which is a topic that it's come up over the last probably 3 or 4 weeks. I've been doing some work for a global client, interviewing different general managers, and it's kind of a consistent theme. So I thought I'd do a bit of research and get it out there on the podcast. This week's coffee is a Fazenda Camocim from Brazil, roasted by Padre Coffee in Melbourne. We were down in South Melbourne Market. Well, South Melbourne Market's one of my favourite Melbourne markets. I think really great city. It should appear on the livability index. Does it have like 3 or 4 really great markets? Melbourne definitely does. I think they're refurbishing, or they're putting some money into redoing Queen Victoria Market. I think they're going to be refurbishing that. But South Melbourne Market, I absolutely love South Melbourne Market. We were down there yesterday and there was a real buzz to the place, and you could get pretty much anything you want, of course, including coffee. There's a great little Padre Coffee place inside there. So Fazenda Camocim, I did my research into this too. It's located a kilometre from the foot of the mystical monolithic mountain Pedra Azul, Blue Rock, in the town of Domingos Martins in Espírito Santo. Espírito Santo is the kind of area in Brazil. Now go and have a look. Go and have a look. I'm not encouraging you to waste time at work. Am I doing that? No, I'm not. Definitely not. And just Google Blue Rock, Brazil. It's beautiful. It's like this. It's kind of. Essentially it's a rock in the middle of nowhere, but it's beautiful. You know, like that. Have you seen the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Every time I make mashed potatoes, I still do that with my fork. I still turn it into the mountain. I don't know why. It's been something I've been doing for years, and even as a 52-year-old fella, I'm still doing it. So you get these rocks, these kind of mountains, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. So Blue Rock, I suppose it's a state park, and it's about 7 hours northeast from Rio, and then 90 minutes west from the coastal town of Vitória. So in 1962, Fazenda Camocim, it was bought by the entrepreneur Oliver Araujo, who was a pioneer in the production of organic coffee in Espírito Santo. And they basically cleared the area and then planted for 30 years. So talk about a long-term project, right? So it was just like, we're going to go crop coffee here. When are we going to start doing it? 3 years? No, 30. Okay, fine. They actually started cultivating in 1996. And they've been producing organic coffees ever since then. They've received kind of certifications in soil quality and organic soil quality, because they don't use any kind of chemicals at all in the production of their coffee. So it's got notes of soft cherry, red apple, milk chocolate, and toffee. Let's just have a chance. Yeah, that's really nice. It's definitely getting the apple and the toffee, which is good because I hate cherries. I don't hate anything, but I don't like cherries. It's not like I'm walking into a shop going, I hate these things. Get them out of my sight. I'm just not a fan of cherries. I don't like the way they look either. I've just got it in for cherries. So yes, that's the coffee. Espírito Santo, interestingly, is also the birthplace of former Everton footballer Richarlison, but that's just for me and not for you. So yes, let's talk about managing different generations. There's 4 generations in the workforce right now, which is a relatively new thing for us as a human race. Hasn't really happened before. And the reason it hasn't happened is because we are living longer, staying in work longer. So we've got baby boomers, we've got Gen X, we've got millennials, and we've got Gen Z. So I think I've done this on a previous podcast, but it's worth making sure that you understand kind of when they were all born. So baby boomers were from the end of the Second World War, but traditionally we think of them as from 1955 to 1964. So they're between 58 and 67 years old. We've got Generation X, who are the best generation, obviously, 1965 to 1980. That's when they were born, so they're between 42 and 57. We've got millennials, who were born between 1981 and 1996, so they're 26 to 41. And we've got Gen Z, who are 1997 to 2012, so they're between the ages of 10 and 25. So we have four different generations in the workforce right now, and they're all different. They're all slightly different. Now, when we talk about the fact that they're all different, they're all slightly different, it's largely in their upbringing and the social culture within which they're raised. So this is, it's really important if you really want to understand workplace culture, you have to understand social culture as well. And the fact that kind of social cultures are different country to country. Now, if you've ever traveled, you know this. You're perhaps not nerdily looking for it like I am, but you definitely know this. You'll definitely see this. If you've worked in different cultures, one of the hardest things you can do is work in another culture. Like if you really want to challenge yourself, go live in a different country, go work in a different culture. You'll hear things like, culture shock. It's when you move from one cultural state to another. So the same is true of social culture as it is of working culture. If you're working in a vibrant culture and you suddenly move to a combatant culture, it's a culture shock because you're like, oh my goodness, and I'm not used to this. So social culture plays a big role in generations, but also our upbringing too. So for me as a teenager, I think about how we're bringing our kids up differently, and every parent is just like, I've got to correct the mistakes of our parents. Actually, they're pretty good child, had a pretty enjoyable lower middle class childhood. Not much money, couldn't do very much. Anything that I wanted clothing wise, I had to actually save up for myself, or it was a birthday or a Christmas present. So it didn't go without. But the way that we were disciplined and the way that we were motivated was quite different to now. Obviously smacking was still a thing. I got hit with a wooden spoon. I was told I wouldn't amount to anything. No one was telling me to live my dream, live my purpose, all of these kinds of things. And different parents did it in different ways, but predominantly you kind of go with the social culture. Like, the kind of prevailing social culture, certainly here in Australia, is one of, it's very casual, it's very laid back. And then you've got how your parents bring you up. Now, kind of me and my wife were British, so obviously our upbringing plays into the way that we bring our kids up as well, and we want to encourage them, we want them to have discipline, we want them to have structure, all of these things. We never dream of hitting our kids. Like, it's just not a thing that we do in this generation, nor should any generation ever do. It's just not a thing that we do, right? So all of these things really play in. So by the time you hit the workforce, every generation's slightly different. So I was talking about this last week, actually. So if you're kind of born or you're in work post World War II, particularly in Europe or America, although similar issues around the world, what you had was people being demobbed, so coming out of the army essentially, and they were either used to giving orders or taking orders. So that's the way the world kind of worked. There were lots of people giving orders, right? So like the concept of a vibrant culture did exist, but these people were kind of real mavericks. They did something completely different. And they didn't really kind of go for the command and control style of management. They weren't trying to I'm reading, I think I mentioned this in the last podcast. I'm reading 11 Rings by Phil Jackson, who's a former coach of the Lakers and the Bulls. And he's talking about previous managers that he'd had, and they would do these almost these inspirational speeches at the start of games to really get people fired up. Come on, go give it to them kind of speeches. And he said by the time he became a manager, but even though he's a baby boomer, by the time he became a manager, he recognized the needs of the players had changed. What was happening was they were going on the court, they were all kind of really fired up, but then by the third quarter, that inspiration had gone. So he chose a different style of management based on the generation that he was managing. So I thought it's really, which is kind of what I'm talking about today. So baby boomers used to kind of being told what to do. By the time you get to Generation X, we're different. We're slightly different. We've got MTV. They never had MTV. We've got shoulder pads. We've got poofy hair. We've got all of these things that you see on Stranger Things. I was watching Stranger Things season 4. In the 80s, we did not dress like that. I just want to make it, if any of the creators, if the Duffer Brothers are listening to this, that's not how we dressed in the 80s. I just want to make that point. That is the music we listen to, right? And how dare you steal Kate Bush from us? But it's definitely not how we dress. We didn't dress like these pastel lunatics. Anyway, but Generation X, we started to push back. Don't you tell us what to do. We're not here to be ordered about. This isn't the war, sonny. And so we started to push back, and we wanted something different. By the time you get to millennials, you want something different again, because, these are our first digital natives, millennials. So all of a sudden, technology is a big part of what they do. It's a big part of what they use. So the expectation is slightly different. They've got more information at their fingertips, and like the generation before, they'll reject, or they've started to reject, some of the things that we consider to be normal as millennials, like kind of open plan offices. And then you get to Generation Z, who different again, and their worldviews are really being shaped by kind of the millennial, the Gen X, the millennial and Gen X parents. And our view of the world is different. They're looking for socially conscious organizations. Kind of Gen Z are coming into the workforce, remember, up to the age of 25. And the last 2 years, they've had more flexibility, which they like. For us as Gen X, well, we didn't have that, and whilst we're okay with it, we were brought up in an office, and that's kind of what we're used to. And again, it's not that we don't want that. I'm not saying that no Generation X wants to, kind of work from home. There's a balance, but different generations want slightly different things. So, you've kind of got to consider all of that. And then you've got to recognize that everyone is different as well. So different people, different personalities, everyone's got slightly different communication needs. And so if you're a manager, it's a minefield. Now, don't get me wrong, managing people was always the hardest thing. As a manager, it's a very specific skill set. One of the things that I'm doing for one organization, I'm working with one organization to help them really reconstruct their culture right now, which I'm loving. It's a fascinating project, but we're putting together a tailored, what we're calling contemporary leadership program. Is what are the leadership skills you need in 2022 and beyond? So, not focusing on some of the stuff that you may have done in the past that's old and boring. What are the contemporary skills you need? Things like social activism, employee activism, looking at things like empathy as a skill rather than as an accident, and things like managing different generations and creating this awareness of different generations. Now, don't get me wrong, whilst managing people is the hardest thing to do, there is an easier way to do it. And the easier way to do it is to make sure you set expectations well. So even if you have no generational awareness whatsoever, even if you have no personality awareness, if you're good at setting and holding people to expectations, you can muddle your way through. It's not ideal, it's not perfect, but you can muddle your way through. Okay? So setting expectations. So this is the first step. This is articulate. So you talking to yourself about what you need somebody else to do that week. So you have to do that first before you can communicate it to them. That's the next step. So I've articulated to myself, I've captured, I'm not going in with a bunch of half-scattered thoughts. I'm going to communicate it to them. I'm going to let them know, and I'm going to do that face-to-face, because that's the most effective way to make sure that people understand. Then the next step is discuss. So we're going to discuss what those expectations are. And then I'm going to confirm it. And I'm going to confirm it usually in writing. I might drop an email. Thank you, Colin, just to confirm what needs to happen by when, right? And so it's very kind of foundation of management is setting expectations really well. And it probably hasn't gone unnoticed that the acronym for that is ACDC, just so it's easy to remember. Okay, so at its foundation, that's what you want to do. So, but when we talk about managing different generations, what are the things to think about? What are the things to do differently? Well, so much research out there, which I've read. I read one piece of information where I'm pretty sure the research was called "Your Employees Don't Like You," and it was talking about different generations that didn't like their manager, and so 33%. So it says younger employees were more likely to report that they didn't like their manager. That's 33% of Gen Z in this particular survey didn't like their manager. 33% of millennials, 32% of Gen X, with only 13% of baby boomers dissatisfied with their direct bosses. And you may be wondering, well, why only 13% of baby boomers? Because their generation was different, right? You suck it up. Head down, bum up. That's what my dad told me when I started work. Head down, bum up. Don't say anything. Take your orders from your boss. That's what you do. You do what you're told, right? So generationally, it's slightly different. Also, they're more likely to be in management positions, so it's about dissatisfaction with themselves. But you know, kind of that's the nature of it from Gen X onwards. We want to feel a connection to our boss. Millennials and Gen Z definitely do. They want you to be someone who is aware of what's happening in the world. They want you to be someone they can follow. They want you to be someone who's high in empathy, you know, and over 3/4 of Gen Z employees who were interviewed for one survey would choose an employer with a strong culture of empathy over a higher salary. You know, that's how important it is. That's not to say that they're not interested in money. Of course they are. They still want to be paid well. And this is one of the things that's changing, right? So socially right now, we are kind of in a recession, kind of. Although you wouldn't think of it, seeing people buying $15 sandwiches in South Melbourne Market yesterday. $15 for a sandwich. That's kind of the norm though now. Went into one place, it was $22 for avocado on toast. It's absolutely bonkers, but people are still paying it. I just hope they're not going in debt. Like if you're listening to this and going in debt, you just create a massive hole for yourself. Anyway, this is not a finance podcast. So you know, kind of their wants, their needs are all slightly different, but never more so in communication. So when we're talking about managing different generations, principally we're talking about kind of different ways of thinking and different ways of communicating. And so I think having that awareness of how each generation wants to be communicated to is crucially important if you're going to manage them. Now baby boomers, you know, kind of they for them it's about formal, direct communication. They're going to prefer the older methods, if that's the right way of saying it. So face-to-face, phone, right? They're the things for baby boomers. Pick up the phone, and you know, if you're interacting with some baby boomers, and this is not to say baby boomers aren't kind of really embracing technology. They are, but they just like their information the way that they received it when they first started work. So for these guys, they like face-to-face and they like phone. They want context. Tell me why. Tell me why. Tell me why. Tell me why. For when you get to Gen X, then you can introduce email into that as well. Now, kind of, I joke all the time about the fact that, you know, we've got problems. It's not a joke, actually. I'm deadly serious. We've got a real problem with devices, and kind of statistically, Generation X is the worst, because for us it was a novelty. It wasn't the norm. It was a novelty. So Gen Xers and email, oh man, they're a nightmare. They're a nightmare for email. They really, really are. So Gen X, so email, phone, and text message. My preferred methods of communication are face-to-face, phone, text message. They're my preferences. It's not to say I won't reply to emails. I will, but certainly when I was in my permanent job, I used to say to my team, don't email me. If you want, if you want to come and if you need anything, pick up the phone, come and see me. And I'd make time to make sure that they were able to do that. So by the time we get to millennials, the communication is quicker. Now, so email is slightly quicker. So what they prefer is things like text and chat and email, right? And kind of when we talk about chat, it's like, app tools. So a digital first approach, essentially. Now that can be very hard for some managers, right? Very hard for some managers when people text in to say they're ill and they can't come to work. They're like, why don't they pick up the phone? Why don't they just phone me? Why are they texting me? It's because generationally we communicate in different ways, plain and simple. And then lastly, Generation Z. Interestingly, most prefer face-to-face. Most prefer human-to-human contact. There's still this view that the latest generation are just completely and utterly wedded to their devices. Now, if you've got kids and you're like, oh, my teens are constantly on their device, well, who gave the device to them, frankly? And remember, they're role modeling what they see from you. So have a look at your own habits first. And then, of course, there's a social culture and the way that we work socially. I was watching, I highly recommend a documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, all about social media. I mean, it's horrific, but it will also give you an insight into social media companies and how they crave your attention and the levels that their algorithms go through to keep you on the applications. I should do a podcast about that, actually, because most people have got really bad habits around technology. So Gen Z prefer face-to-face, all right? And that's what the research actually says, even though when the same researchers asked manager, what do you think Gen Z's primary need for communication is, they said technology. And that's not true. It's not true. Now, remember, you might be Gen Z listening to this podcast and you might be thinking, actually, I prefer text message, I prefer chat message. Okay, you might be thinking, remember, different personalities, different social cultures. So all of these things play in. And there's a really, really, really easy way to resolve all this. It's something that I do as part of my culture experience workshops, is we get people to write down what are their preferred methods of communication. Get people to write down what are your three, what are your top three. And I did a culture workshop last week with a really great group in New South Wales. It helps that the venue was good. Like, the venue was good, the organisation was excellent, the people who organised it were great. And then people brought the right intention to the room, right? It was just one of those great 2-day workshops. It was full of energy, full of laughter. Like, the leaders were all there and they were all present. It was great 2 days. And so I was walking around having a look at everyone's communication preferences. And they're all slightly different. What a surprise. They're all slightly different. And I remember talking to one guy whose name I can't remember. And I said, do you guys ever talk about communication in your team? He's like, we never talk about communication. He's like, we do it, but we don't talk about it. And I said, cool. I was like, so, what are you going to take away? He's like, well, we've now got a tool where we can go back and go, all right, this is how I like to be communicated to. This is how I like to be communicated to. Now, as a manager, it's such an easy thing to do, because all of a sudden you get the insight into, well, how do I get the best from this individual? Now, remember one of the differences between managers and leaders. Leaders very much tailor the communication style towards the individual. That's what leaders do. Managers just try and do a one-size-fits-all. These are the people who just send an email to everybody telling them. Now, you can do that to confirm something, that's part of expectation setting. Otherwise, what you really want to do is think about different generations and how they like to receive information. And the last thing to do, last thing that I'll share on this podcast about managing different generations. So that's the different communication styles. So baby boomers, kind of face-to-face phone, Gen X, face-to-face email, millennials, kind of text, messaging, then probably face-to-face, Gen Z, face-to-face, chat tools, video. Yeah. The last thing I'll mention is if you want to get better in your organization, or if you as an individual want to get better at managing different generations, reverse mentoring is something that you can consider. Reverse mentoring is when you work one-to-one with a member of another generation and share information on what makes that generation tick. As a manager, what you don't want to do is to become irrelevant. All right. And I remember in one session, I got one member of each generation. I prepped them prior to the workshop, but I got one member of each generation because there were four to talk about their own generation and kind of what they're worried about and, communication preferences. And it was fascinating. It was truly so that's something else you can do. So, kind of like the reverse mentoring or information sharing on different ways that different generations like to be managed. And what you then do is remove that opportunity for confusion, that opportunity for communication breakdown within your team, within your organization. All right, that's your Culture and Coffee podcast for today. I hope you have a fabulous day wherever you are in the world. Ta for now.